You can already picture it. A pretty young figure, dressed comfortably, scribbling away in a notebook and listening to music in the most colorful and inviting space imaginable. Maybe there's some coffee, or tea, or a pet, or a window peering into the sunset or the stars, all giving life to a task as menial as typing, writing, studying, sleeping. These ambient cliches can be found all over the internet to a degree that's admittedly a little comical. It's an easy framing device to imitate and repackage for one's own presence and branding, as well as parody. The funniest are probably the ones that go for the opposite effect. Now, if you're coming here from my ambient penthouse video, you might be expecting some dry, black-pilled piece on how saturated the market of chill-hop streams and long plays is, how copy-pasted the aesthetics and settings have gotten in attempts to capitalize on this modern phenomenon. And yeah, there's some lazy stuff out there, but that's been the case throughout all forms of popular art. Garage rock throughout the decades, TV shows based on toys and card games, family sitcoms. Every format and industry has its imitators, and that's the way it always will be. And there are times to point out these less than authentic patterns in our society that get so bountiful that it starts to deflate the value a thing had in the first place. But I've done enough of that for the time being. This video is going to focus on how nice and cool things can be. The only reason this market of new media exists in the first place is because this idealized, happy place lies in the heart of most overworked people, no matter their age. Office workers, students, and partakers in the gig economy live such flippant lives where high-stakes turnarounds or adjustments can interrupt an otherwise straightforward flow of progress in the blink of an eye. And those kinds of conditions spark a desire for quiet, stillness, content. And so, these various channels and distributors and streams try to appeal to this longing, and few can deny that at the end of the day, you can't beat the original. Lo-Fi Girl, whose popularity and iconic image was so welcomed into the public consciousness that her parent company Chilled Cow eventually rebranded their name, is one of the epicenters for this entire movement of long-form, chill musical broadcast. Like many that followed, playlists and radio stations can be found on all major music platforms for endless hours of lo-fi beats and dreamy textures, but we're going to focus on the YouTube presence for now. Here's that template that we discussed, in its purest and most polished form. Our setting has so much character between the packed shelves, the crowded desk, and the cityscape framed in the window. Our girl's given so many frames of animation to accommodate the music and the vibes. She blinks, she writes, she sniffs, her hair and googly-eyed headphones bounce as she turns her head, she'll turn a page here and there, all as her cat's tail swings back and forth on the windowsill. All these levels of variation give life to the art style, which is itself as pleasant as the work of Hayao Miyazaki or Shinichiro Watanabe. This particular stream is arguably where it all started, an old faithful of chill-hop relaxation that's been emulated hundreds of times elsewhere. But the channel has since expanded into a wider selection of scenes that have proven to be just as influential. These looped vignettes distill that sense of ease in a way that appeals to people all over the world, much like how 88 Rising achieved by merging Eastern talent with a more Western musical and artistic sensibility. I just think one of the coolest things about the 2010s was all of these bridges that kept finding ways to materialize online. Randos in North America, Africa, Asia are all watching this stuff at the same time, and I find that neat. But then we get to the albums. In addition to the streams that curate and shuffle beatmakers worldwide at a non-stop rate, we have standalone releases comprised entirely of an individual artist's tracks. These allow for a more in-depth listen, unified by one producer's vision and accompanied by a unique work of visual art. And this is where we get to my favorite aspect of the Lo-Fi Girl channel. By going to their video tab, you get to scroll through what's essentially the most proactive and known art gallery in this particular sphere of the internet, all rolled up into one easy-to-swallow package that melds seamlessly into a casual audience's routine. Pretty sounds, pretty picture. Take it on a train. Listen to it on the way to work. Just maybe don't look at the art too often if you're driving. That would be bad. You can get a greater sense of the community and their approach to the brand by visiting their website, which is really sleek and designed in a way that highlights the creations and the people who make them, rather than the brand. Every layer gets a tab, beatmakers, illustrators, and the albums that marry the two together, complete with a lovely and poetic write-up for that particular piece.
Hello. Kinissue issues a calm and relaxing way to spend the night with his latest EP, Sea Beams. Sleepy guitars and piano chords ripple effortlessly, making it feel like a calm evening at the beach. Feel the sand underneath, and take a deep breath of the refreshing night air.
It's hard to explain, but everything about this model just does it for me. There's like so much attention to detail and minimal interference from the business and branding of this thing, and that genuinely makes me happy in this world where too many goddamn things are commodified. Again, this whole genre of online content, the mass production, compilation, and distribution of laid-back hip-hop broadcasted in more or less identical trappings, can get pretty overwhelming, even off-putting if you look at it strictly from an industrial lens. Like, that's a lot of product, and a lot of it sounds and feels the same, artist to artist, label to label. I mean, let's be honest, how many producers, as objectively hardworking and talented as they might be, just sound like early Joji tracks? In fact, even as a fan of Joji myself, I think Anthony Fantano unwittingly summed up a lot of modern lo-fi production in his review of his In Tongues EP from 2017.
To me, a lot of these songs just kind of run in a circle until they're just sort of over. I don't mind the moody tone of the record, but I feel like it kind of stands in the way of the music actually sort of going anywhere. Again, aesthetically, I don't mind what Joji is going for here, but there's not a whole lot to it beyond its moody vibe. It doesn't really strike me as awful. It doesn't really strike me as great. It just kind of feels like, I don't know, a bit of musical wallpaper to me.
That's always stuck with me. Granted, when I first heard it, I was pretty high off the novelty that Filthy Frank was making serious music, but now that some time's passed and that motherfucker's made much more fleshed out and exciting music, I can totally see where he's coming from. And yet, at the same time, I'm also not entirely against the concept of musical wallpaper. I mean, it's always been part of the title of these things, to relax or study or work to. I think it's pretty clear that it's more there to fill the void than to be, I don't know, To Pimp a Butterfly or Kind of Blue or The Wall. Going back to my earlier point on art, every musical trend since the Beatles and the British invasion has been hyper-accelerated, a bandwagon of inspiration and imitation so vast that you end up with the homogeneous ocean of sound and rhythm. And every time the process of producing and distributing music has gotten more easily accessible to the masses, that pattern of genre chasing and market saturation has only gone up. In the end, though, art is art. Any song by any person can find an audience, even if the peak reward is just paying for a week of that artist's rent. The audience yields the benefit of a chill couple of minutes, a less apprehensive state of mind while doing their taxes or their homework, or hell, it could create a spark to make something of their own, whether it's a beat or a painting or a poem. The density of creative influence is daunting, especially now. But compared to the anxieties and nihilism that plague a restless mind, it's an absolute good. Which brings me to my final point, and admittedly the reason I decided to do a video on Lo-Fi Girl in the first place. You can use their music for free. So on top of having just one of the most visually appealing and pleasant channels on all of YouTube, on top of having multiple non-stop video streams of lo-fi beats to do pretty much anything to, along with having a diverse and talented pool of visual and aural creatives working together, along with being able to go on Apple Music or Spotify, download all this shit to your phone and go on a walk wherein it doesn't even matter if it's raining or there's no animals around. There's clouds in the art. There's birds in the art. There might even be wind and ambient rain and birds in the song, which puts birds and clouds in your heart and your head. And that makes anything better no matter what the context. So we have all that going for us, but to top it all off, I can go to your website, download that shit to my computer, have that stuff for myself, and then put that stuff into my own stuff for free. I appreciate that. That's super cool, and you didn't have to do it. but you did it anyway out of the goodness of your heart. Like, it's a company. Companies don't have hearts, but companies are run by people who do have hearts, who have the choice either to or to not be cool and do cool things with no expectation of anything in return. Like, that's... I do appreciate that. That's all I'm really, really trying to say with this, fucking 10-minute video. I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Shit.